Hey there, it's Brian Goulet of the Goulet Pen Company and Ink Nouveau. Today I'm going to show you how to swap out the nib on a Monteverde Invincia pen. Monteverde has the ability to swap nibs, which is pretty cool because it means that as a retailer we can offer nibs on pens that normally wouldn't be available, but also you can buy the nibs separately. So if you want to keep kind of an assortment of nibs but only buy a single pen, you can swap out the different sizes and mix and match, and it's kind of cool. But it's a little different than some of the other pens that swap nibs like Lamy or Edison or some of the other ones that I have videos on. So I want to show you how to do one on a Monteverde, and then you'll know what's going on. So let's check it out. One of the cool things about Monteverde is that you can swap out nibs on their pens, but there's several different models that you can do this on. There's the Invincia. The Invincia has a color fusion, which is basically the same pen, just different colors and whatnot. There's the black matte, like the stylus version, that has the conductive rubber on the top for using on touchpad devices. Those are all basically the same pen for all intents and purposes. For what we're talking about here, the nib is the same. Also within Monteverde, you've got the Regatta, which is their magnetic cap one, and you've got the Napa as well. And these all use the same number 6 size nib. So any of the Monteverde nibs can be swapped out within these pens. The only one that's really different that I'm aware of at the making of this video is the Artista Crystal, which uses a smaller number 5 nib. So the Artista, unfortunately, you can't swap out that one, but you can on the Monteverde Invincia in Napa and Regatta. So what really kind of helps is if you want to get a pen that maybe would only be normally offered with a steel, like silver colored nib. Like for example, the rose gold standard Invincia. Now there's an Invincia Deluxe that has carbon fiber in the cap that you can get in the black, but the standard Invincia comes with a steel colored nib. But because they offer nibs separately, retailers, if they so choose, can buy the nibs separately and can offer to put these nibs on this pen and sell it to you that way. That's one cool thing about being able to swap out these nibs. The other cool thing is that you can buy just the nibs separately, and then you can have a pen with, say, a fine nib on it, and then you can also have, say, a 1.1 stub, and you can write with the fine for a while, pull the nib out, write with the italic for a while. You can kind of vary it up without having to drop, $80 or $100 on another whole pen. You can get just the nib, which is, about 24 bucks. So that kind of helps. But the swapping out of the nib. Okay, so let's get to the meat of it here. The nib as it comes is just like any other fountain pen nib. It does not come with a whole housing like you may have seen offered on the Edison nibs, which at Goulet Pens we've been offering that for a while. The housing is not all that different on this pen. Let me take out the converter, which is not a bad idea when you're trying to remove the whole nib unit. Basically, if you want to remove the whole unit, you just grab the top and the bottom of the feed and the nib like that, as close to the base of it as you can. You don't want to grab the tip because you don't want to get the tines out of alignment. So if you grab here at the base and then twist counterclockwise, it will unscrew this whole housing out of here. And this is probably not all that unfamiliar of a sight to you if you have seen nib units offered separately before. I know Pelican sells nib units like this separately. Like I mentioned, Edison. There's a couple other brands out there that do it. The basic component of this nib unit is that you have a housing in here which is threaded, and that's what screws into the grip section of the pen. You've got the feed underneath and you've got the nib on top. We can actually just take and pull, again, grabbing the base of the nib and the feed, and you can pull out the nib and the feed. It's just friction fit in there. Pull it out and the nib and the feed come off separately. So let me zoom in a little bit here, show you some better detail. But the housing itself, I'm going to put it back into the grip section of the pen because, as I mentioned before, the nib is only offered like this. So there's really not a lot of need to take it out of the housing, or sorry, to remove the whole housing from the pen, unless you want to clean it better, which you can do that. But there's really no need, because when you're swapping out the nib, like I'm going to show you here, you're really dealing with just these parts. So you've got the nib and the feed that we've just pulled out of the pen. Well, the way that these things sit in here is it's rounded, but then it's flat on the bottom. And that is kind of a guide to help to show you how that feed is supposed to fit in there. The feed, as you notice, is flat on the bottom as well. Well, if you try and fit the feed in any other way than with it on the bottom, it'll go in a little bit when it's upside down, but that is not going to get you very far. If you try and do it sideways, it's just flat out not going to fit. It's got to be where that flat part on the feed mates up to the flat part on the feed housing. And when you do it, it's going to go in there all the way. When it's in seated all the way, it's going to have a positive stop on it because it's hitting the back of that housing inside the grip section. Well, it's going to have a little curve to the bottom of the feed, and that is where it is going to stop. So you see here, the feed kind of comes out like that, and then it cuts a little curve in here. And it should go in until just that curve starts to pop out. Now, some of the older feed designs are a little bit different than this, but the basic concept is still the same. Some of the older Monteverde feeds are a little different, so don't be too incredibly shocked if you see one that doesn't have this curve on it and it's flatter. That's still okay. So basically, the idea is you need to get it set in there the right way. And when you do that too, not only, let me get the focus back. Come on. There we go. Okay, so once you see the flat part that's cut here, well, it's rounded at the top, and this is very, very subtle, so I don't know how well you'll be able to see this, but starting right there and looping around to right there, there's an extra little inset that's cut out, and that is made to hold the nib in place because you need a little bit extra diameter there to be able to fit that feed in there. Sorry, fit the nib in there. So it's a very kind of a specific way that needs to fit in there. It kind of makes it a little easier because it's a little bit dummy proof, where it's really hard to fit it in there wrong. And if you shouldn't have to force any of this. Okay, it should be just really pretty easy to get it in there. You want to align the nib and the feed. There's really nothing on the nib and the feed that is going to help you out in terms of positive stop or anywhere where it locks in or anything like that. But that doesn't matter because once you get it in the housing, it will kind of self-align. So you'll just kind of want to get it in this general location like that. So you want the rounded part of the feed to mate to the rounded underside of the nib. And you want to get it about close like that. And then you've got the flat part of the feed right here that needs to mate to the flat part on the housing. And then you basically just kind of push the two in together, okay, until it won't go in anymore. And then to make sure that the nib, the feed is definitely in all the way, because I can tell because of that little curve thing, and it won't physically go in anymore. The one thing you never want to do is push on the tip to try to get it in there. If you need to push the nib in a little bit more, grab the wings and don't squeeze them together, but just kind of push down on the shoulders of the wings a little bit, just to make sure that it's seated all the way in there. And it is, and it's pretty much locked in positively. It should go in really easily if it's in the right way. And then the other thing you want to check out is just make sure that your feed is kind of not cocked off to the side like that. You want to make sure that it's kind of just set right in the middle of the nib like there. And that's about it. So, you know, if you want to do it a little bit faster and easier, sometimes, especially with the steel ones, not necessarily, it's not as easy with the black ones, but you can actually just pull the nib itself out. If you kind of grab on the sides of the back of the nib here and kind of rock it back and forth, you can sometimes just pull the nib itself out. The feed stays in the pen, and then if you want to replace just the nib, you can, you know, just slide it right in there, push on those shoulders, and set it in there, and bam, you're done. I mean, look how fast that was. But the one thing I do want to say is that the black nibs have a coating on them. It's basically the same nib, it's just got some kind of black lacquer, I'm assuming. Some kind of black coating on it that you know, makes it just ever so slightly thicker than the steel nib. So when you're fitting a black nib onto the pen, it's going to be just a little bit harder to put on and off than it will be for the steel nib. So just be aware of that. But now you've got a pen that normally wouldn't come with a black nib, but in my opinion looks so much better to have a black nib on this Invincia rose gold. And that is how you swap out the Monteverde nib. That should help clear some things up about swapping nibs on the Monteverde Invincia. If you got any questions, just post them down in the comments. Thanks so much for watching, and right on.